You see a lot of do's out there for how you should prepare your marketing campaigns kind of for Q4, but we decided to just go straight don'ts. This is just don't
set unrealistic goals.
Lots of people like to think it's Q4, we're going to kill it. We want scale growth. We want to maintain our efficiency and even get better efficiency. Let's pick one thing that we know that we can do and work towards that one thing.
Don't ignore competitor activity. Be aware of what everybody else in the space is doing, especially when you're planning, because if everyone is bidding on the same terms at the same time, the amount of money that you might have set aside for a standard ads campaign might not be enough now.
Don't.
If you're listening to this podcast, just don't do any of these things and you should more or less be fine. It's all killer, no filler. I'm Eric, and we have yet another first-timer here on the DTC Podcast, Zavire, along with Adam. Zavire, you are our senior, one of our senior Google Media buyers over on the Pilothouse side. Adam, you are heading up. I actually didn't know that you're heading up our pilot program, which is awesome, which gives you purview across a bunch of different platforms. But we were talking a little bit about the theme of today's podcast, and you were saying you see a lot of do's out there for how you should prepare your marketing campaigns kind of for Q4, but we decided to just go straight don'ts. This is just don't even. That's what this one is called. Don't even do any of these things. Zav, kick us off with the first thing you don't want to do in this year.
I would say don't set unrealistic goals. Because when you're planning for Q4, everything starts with strategy. And so to keep yourself grounded, I would say the very first thing you want to do is be realistic about the goals you set. The best way to do that is usually just to look at historical, try to build on last year's, see what is possible for the brand and for where you guys are at. And then once you've identified some goals that are within reach, then you can start to build a plan around those, everything kind of using those as like a North Star.
And you can't just make it appear out of a poof. You can't, if you want to hit certain numbers, you've got to be putting a certain amount into the machine. And so if there's a disconnect there, it's going to be a problem. Adam, what do you say about expectations and realistic goals?
I have a background in behaviorism, so I kind of look at it from like behaviorist principles. And when you want something that's difficult to achieve, like a complex behavior, you don't just jump right to trying to program that new complex behavior. You do incremental, achievable steps that will bring you closer to that end goal. So that's kind of the tack that I like to take. Lots of people like to think it's Q4, we're going to kill it. We want scale growth. We want to maintain our efficiency and even get better efficiency. It's like, let's pick something one thing that we know that we can do and work towards that one thing.
Yo, that's so key. You actually just made a really good point. I feel like not only is it really important that you set goals that are realistic, but like not too many goals either. Like you really need to pick like one KPI or like even like 3 KPIs at most that are actually within reach, and then just go for those. I feel like sometimes come to the table with like 8 different goals or like 9 different things they want to achieve, and then it's just kind of a shit show. Can I say shit show? It's kind of a shit show.
You can say shit show.
Okay,
this is an adult podcast. You can crack a beer.
Whoa, I might actually.
You are on the East Coast, so it's doable. Okay.
4 p.m.
We're very pro hydration here on this podcast, so that's why I bring this giant liter of BioSteel into the picture, freak everyone out. Adam, give me another don't. What's another big don't?
Don't wait to start. Start early, because you like preparedness is like 80% of the battle here. The way I look at it, if we were going to like zoom out and take a macro view, I look at Q1, depending on the market or the type of product you sell, Q1 can sometimes be a wash, but I like using Q2 for testing copy, testing creative, figuring out what messaging works for what personas. And then Q3, we like to use for building the funnel, filling those funnels that we can, retarget the stragglers, the cart abandoners in Q4. But yeah, you want to start thinking about Q4 in Q2 almost.
You mentioned personas there too, and I feel like that's just an underlying point we hit on the podcast all the time, is that make sure that you do have like a really 360 view of who your customers are, what they have for breakfast, what their days are like, and really be focusing your marketing to those connections rather than spraying and praying.
That's really important to keep in mind because, in terms of getting somebody to convert, getting somebody to sign up or purchase a product, there comes a point where there's like a straw that breaks the camel's back. And I like to think about it as the point where you get the right messaging in front of the right person at the right time. And to do that, you need to understand who you're talking to so you can talk to them how they like to be talked to, or give them information that's hyper relevant to their specific use case or problem solution.
We've talked a lot about in the past few weeks about stocking the pond when it comes to making actually reaching your Q4 goals by bringing customers into your funnel now that you can be rehitting. Where, Zav, from a Google perspective, where are we at now? Like, where should brands be on Google, let's say, now in terms of Q4? What stage are we in?
It really depends on what you're selling and who you're selling it to. But I would say we should be, planning should be done. Content should be made. Like it should be, I would say for the majority of the brands that I'm working with right now, we're really trying to build that funnel in the very late stages of building that funnel that we're going to then remarket to starting in November, ideally getting ready for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, like even at the end of October, again, depending on what you sell, like you might even want to do all of this before Halloween. Like you might be ramping up to do that stuff. So like realistically, the planning should be done. And like you should be in like heavy into the execution phase by now. Early October.
What else should we know? What is another don't? Give me another don't.
Another don't ignore competitor activity. So it's super important to just be aware of what everybody else in the space is doing, especially when you're planning, because what everyone else is doing is going to have an effect on your costs. I mean, if everyone is bidding on the same terms at the same time, the amount of money that you might have set aside for, a standard ads campaign might not be enough now to have the visibility that you might have expected. If you're hoping to like buy, some specific inventory, like a YouTube masthead or something like that, that is going to be, that inventory is probably already gone at this point, So those are things, and I mean, depending on what your competitors are doing, it could actually help you. You maybe don't want to, if someone in your industry has already like bought up all the subway ads in a particular city, maybe you can just do Google ads, understanding that everyone is already aware of, your industry because of what your competitors done.
The rising tide phenomenon.
Yeah, exactly. So it's super important to just like, even if it's not as a huge part of your planning, but just to be aware, of what everybody else is doing and how you can use that to your advantage.
Adam, what do you have to say about competitive monitoring? Because I know you want to monitor your competitors. At the same time, you want to be doing innovative things. You want to be the one that they're copying whenever possible. I know that's true as well.
Yeah, and I was talking with somebody yesterday, and they were saying how, Albert Einstein wouldn't have come up with the theory of special relativity if there wasn't already a theory of relativity, right? So you can't rewind Albert Einstein back 10,000 years ago and he's just going to be like special relativity. It's not going to happen. Like all ideas are built on ideas that came before them. And in that sense, you got to steal like an artist. So you do, one of the reasons we look at competitors to see what they're doing, see what works. As a brief aside, if you're looking at the Google Ads transparency website, and that allows you to see what ads companies have run and in which markets, like geographically, you want to look on there and see which ones have been active the longest, because those have sticking power. And you do that a number of times with your competitors, you can find some commonalities between the ads and use that to inform the type of ads that you make. Or you could do like the skyscraper method. Zav and I were talking about this earlier, where you do mass research, you figure out everything that's been done, and you repeat it and improve upon it. Just make the product better, and product in this sense being the actual ad.
And in these moments of high competition, we also have the U.S. election cramming in there for ad spend and everything. What's your don't around budgeting, Adam? You've got a hard don't.
Don't skimp on resources and investment. So one quick tip there is to use historical data, look back at last year, see what the average CPM increase was between Q3 and Q4. Be prepared to invest that percentage increase into your budget from Q3. So that's just baseline, right? We need to, in order to keep the same amount of eyeballs, probably, hopefully the same amount of conversions, we at least need to match the CPM increase. But then again, you need to account for, well, we want to actually sell more, right? So then you figure out what your cost per conversion is. And if you have a goal of selling 10% more, cost per conversion times conversions times 0.1, figure out how much more budget you need. Sorry, maybe you can have the editor put that equation up on the screen so it makes more sense. But yeah.
It's super interesting. Zav, what anything to say on resources?
Yeah, I mean, I would go even further than investment and like resources in terms of the financial, about like human resources as well. Not the dangerous kind, but like just making sure that you're there, like watching the campaigns. I mean, I know it's super easy to go on vacation for the holidays and like just leave everything for 2 weeks and come back. But I mean, a lot of the efficiencies you can find, a lot of the quick wins you're going to get are going to be in that time, that key period where you definitely don't want to be watching. Because the thing to remember too is like a lot of your competitors are not watching, their ads. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for you to win in different spaces, different markets, different things that you might not have been able to try, and ways of pivoting that wouldn't necessarily work in other times of the year, could potentially work in such a volatile period where you can spend a lot of money in a short period of time and potentially see a lot of return as a result of that. So as tempting as it might be, check your ads over the holidays.
I think a lot of what we talk about on the podcast with Pilothouse is ways that we're segmenting things to be efficient, to be more efficient, because these platforms will take your money any way they can take it. And if they can take it real fast on something that maybe doesn't work as well for you, there are a lot of instances where that will happen. So I feel like a lot of what we do is about finding those efficiencies. And I've heard on those days where you have these huge spends happening, and then one of those people runs out of budget and you're there to take their spot. I remember on Amazon that being such a huge deal. Anything else just to say on efficiencies? Maybe Zav specifically on the Google Ad Suite?
No, I mean, like as long as you're watching, I think it's super easy to tell where the efficiencies are coming from. Regardless of whether you're, do DIY or you paying an agency, like if you're actually there watching it day over day, it'd be easy to see like where efficiencies are coming from and what you can do to make some of those changes. And that can be as simple as like reducing budgets to a campaign, or like adding some keywords where you want to add some keywords, switching out your ads so that they're more relevant. All those things are going to be super useful to you, and especially at this time of year, potentially save you or make you a lot of extra money.
I think the other piece that we've talked about is just sort of the idea of like forcing incrementality, or not allowing all of the automated ad tools on platforms like Google and others, take traffic that would have maybe converted anyway, on your brand, for instance, and then meet your goals with that traffic rather than kind of forcing it into actually providing incrementality.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I think branded advertising, again, it totally depends on your market. And this is where we're talking about competitor activity. It's really it's super important to be aware of what everybody else is doing, because that's going to be one of the things that kind of points you in a particular direction. Like if your competitors are advertising a lot in a particular space, like you might not want to be there. So yeah, just be aware of what everybody else is doing, and then you can potentially play off that and get incremental gain.
Very cool. What's our next don't?
Next don't discount best sellers or best value. It can be really easy to want to, you have something that's selling like hotcakes and just put a 20% discount on it. But I mean, a lot of those things are going to sell anyways. So, I mean, you're really just discounting, like you're losing potential revenue as a result of those kinds of discounts. Or the best value. I mean, sometimes a 20% discount on the cheapest possible thing isn't necessarily what it's going to bring consumers value, even if eyeballs on a promotion is often a good thing. And we can even get even deeper into like discounts, looking at like dollar value discounts versus percentage discounts on like,
do dollars almost always work better because it's more tangible?
I mean,
as with most things, it depends.
Yes,
kind of on the product price. Because if you think about it, I think a lot of Q4 shoppers aren't really moved by a 20% discount, to be honest. I'm looking for 30, 40 personally, right? So you have a higher priced product. Let's say, for instance, it's $1,000. Instead of saying 20% off, say $200 off. I think you have to make the decision kind of on a case-by-case basis, whether or not you want to use the dollar amount, percentage amount, and sometimes it's even super impactful to show like price was versus now. Sometimes you show the original price, strike through, and then new price. But again, These are things that can be tested with promos earlier in the year, not waiting until Q4 to figure it out.
100%. I feel like 20% discount on a $20 item is only $4. But if you say 20%, it seems a lot more significant than a $4 discount. And so for I think for like low dollar value items, percent is usually better. Higher dollar value, dollar amount's usually better, but not always. Yeah, it always depends on what you're selling.
I've heard a lot of clever brands in this period who are maybe aren't discount focused can focus on other things like product launches during this time as well, which can be really effective if you're not focused on discounting. Just use the increased attention to launch a new product.
Yeah, and if you pair that with urgency and scarcity in your messaging, that could really have a snowball effect. If it's a new launch, say it's a limited edition and there's like an early access email subscribe list, like all of those things are exclusivity, there's urgency, and there's scarcity, which is leads us to one of our next points. One of our next don'ts is don't forget to leverage urgency and scarcity in your ads.
I mean, that can look like anything from adding a countdown timer to a Google ad or adding low stock to like a meta static or something like that. Even as simple as like some people forget to add like simple calls to action on a static image that can really boost your conversion rate up significant amount by just saying like shop now, buy now, So just making sure that you are adding little tiny things to your ads, to your campaigns that can potentially just start to create that urgency, maybe FOMO, like whatever tactics that you're using. Just make sure that they're visible, especially at this time of year when people know that stock is likely to be low. They know that there's likely to be deals. People are looking out for that kind of stuff at this time.
100%. You've got a note here about using hourly discounts. What does that strategy look like?
There's a couple different ways you can implement it, but like countdown clocks, like a different countdown clock under different products featured on a collections page. You could just like inform people using like short form video, like this is on sale until 12 this day. This is on sale, just like that. And it's a technique that I personally haven't tried yet because it can require more like dev access to like the website and that kind of thing. And I typically don't have that level of like hands-on into the dev side when we're partnered with people. But it's something that I've been looking into and I would like to explore with the right partner. They have to have the right type of product and business model that would be appropriate for. But yeah, definitely something for people that have multiple products, or even if they just want to have short-term promos within a longer promo season, something you can think about because it really does increase the urgency and the scarcity,
I think if you're a smaller brand or like you're doing your own DIY marketing and you can pivot in that way and you have full dev control, like that's a really great option to do kinds of things like that, like very short-term things, kind of like ephemeral forms of advertising you can put on the page that really pop out to people.
We've got a few. Those are the main don'ts, but we have time for our addendum don'ts. First of our addendum don'ts, Adam.
This one's obvious, but don't run out of stock. Look at historical data. What did we sell last year? How is that comparing with our projections for this year? Let's use our projections based on historical data to get an appropriate amount of stock. And like any good handyman knows, you gotta over purchase. You gotta get like at least 10%. If we're doing flooring, we get 10 to 15% wastage. Get 10 to 15% extra stock. Just because if it doesn't move in the time frame that you think it will, then you have extended Black Friday sale just to get it out the door,
You're the only person doing special relativity and flooring metaphors in the same media buying podcast, so I appreciate that.
I feel like it can be hard to do. It can be hard to do that for a small brand, getting an extra 10 to 15% of your stock can sometimes overstretch. But I've seen so many times when that really paid off. And I mean, ultimately, like Adam says, like you're going to sell that, you'll move that inventory eventually, So bet on yourself and just like try to move as much as possible in the holiday period.
And in most cases, it's not expiring in this industry, right? So it's not going to sink you too hard. And then you got Q5 to worry about after that. Zav, what's our next addendum don't?
Don't keep running evergreen. I would say one of the biggest things you always see. There's so much to be said for, especially at this time of year, just modifying your creative even if it's just slightly to match the season, and whether that means having statics where If it's just a person, they're in a winter jacket and it's winter time as opposed to, the spring. Just those tiny little things. I've seen those things have such an effect when we're talking about our conversion rates and our click-through rates, and how many people are actually engaging with the brand and interested in what we're trying to sell. Just having creative messaging copy that is on point and relevant to the holiday period.
It reminds me of a case study from early in my career where I was running all these ads for this jewelry retailer called bids.com. And we just would feature their jewelry in like a grid format kind of thing with the price and the discount kind of right there. And then I was like, it's fall. It's like the first day of fall. Like, what if we just added like leaves falling to this? And it like doubled the conversion rate basically, because it's just like, it's meeting the customer where they're at in one way. Like, oh, I'm fall. And fall is probably the most evocative season in a way, right? To go from summer into everything kind of dying and falling. It's like, there's probably a lot of ways you can build that into your ads.
Mm-hmm. There's so many ways. And it's honestly not terribly expensive to do. And it's not a pivot that should take too much time. I mean, obviously, depending on what kind of creative you have going. But yeah, it's like one of the most effective things you can possibly do.
Nice. Harken back to Avery's podcast that she did a while ago, just about getting ready for Halloween and doing some testing on Halloween where you just take a fear around your product, whether it's FOMO, whether it's running out, and you just put that, you call it spooky. And then it's like, it's spooky when you run out of face cream. Boom, there's your ad. Give that a try.
I like that.
Adam, anything more to say on that, or we move to our next don't?
We can move to the next don't. And the next don't is don't ignore regional and cultural holidays. Also, like addendum. There's like one-off kind of BS holidays for everything. So I was looking up holidays that would align with a wine brand that I was working with, and you'd be surprised. There's like Cabernet Week, So there's a few websites to do this. All you'd have to do is like ask Jeeves. Hey Jeeves, give me a list of all of the holidays that people celebrate in the U.S.
Alta Vista.
Yeah.
Alta Vista, yeah. Or, get on ICQ, ask your homies.
Do you know what today is? Do you know what? It's funny. We ran stuff like this in the newsletter just to alert people because there's always ways. Today is National Cinnamon Roll Day.
You know what?
Also, National Taco Day, National Vodka Day. We could have a party, guys. This could be pretty good.
I once ran a National Smiles Day program, and it did not do very well. But
Oh, interesting.
Clients love it.
What time of year was it?
So I think it was the springtime, National Smiles Day. Yeah, it was like June or maybe before that, May.
That seems like a happy season to me.
What were the holidays that you had mentioned here in the notes?
Diwali, Hanukkah. Those are just some examples. I always kind of steer away from any holiday that has that people in the community might hold precious. Like I don't like running advertisements on a Veterans Day. That feels bad form, So you do want to be careful there, but sometimes it's appropriate for a brand. Like if it's like a super Americana style brand that like aligns with Veterans Day, then that would make sense, But keep in mind that there is sensitivities around cultural and religious holidays, and be respectful.
You don't want to be feeling like you're appropriating or coming off really cheesy about it.
You definitely don't want to appropriate, but you don't want to offend either. And I guess appropriation is offense. Yeah. So yeah, don't offend anybody. Keep it light.
I like it. Okay, what's our next don't?
Don't neglect the full funnel. I feel like, especially around this time of year, because there's such a heavy conversion ROAS focus, people are really, really looking at the bottom of the funnel. But the thing is, like, the full funnel is so important. And especially now, people who've never heard of your brand are looking for things to buy as gifts for things that they personally will never use, but people that they love, that they care about do. So don't be afraid to grow those audiences. Make sure that you're targeting people full phase of the funnel. All of the people who might want your product, all the people who are looking to gift. You have such a wide audience at this time of year that is really unique from any other quarter. So yeah, just make sure that those people are looked after. And also just remembering that in Q1, I mean, you're still going to have to sell stuff. So making sure that your funnel is full for, getting going for 2025 as well.
Very cool. And then Adam, as the pilot program director, you're dealing with lots of different channels here. So you've got a note on do not overemphasize the importance of one specific channel.
Yeah, like I think I wrote in our notes there, follow the data to find the money. I think is an important point. Be channel agnostic. Like a lot of people, in my experience, there's like a lot of focus on meta, and that can cause like some siloing and not integrating other channels correctly. And kind of what Zav was referring to earlier, how people tend to focus like super hyper focus on bottom of funnel this time of year. Don't forget about retention. If email retention still running in the background, it's going to capture a lot of those bottom of funnel sales at full price anyways. You know what I mean? Keep that in mind. Don't just overinvest in something because of vanity metrics, say. A lot of top of funnel prospecting stuff that's done on Meta, we see those conversions come through on Google. But there's got to be the spend on Google to capture the conversions, and there has to be the spend on Meta to get people interested in the product and thinking about converting. So you really do need to take a holistic view of everything and make strategic decisions, not decisions based on
on platform ROAS numbers, like
that's what I was gonna say. You know, be long-sighted, don't be short-sighted. Yeah.
The last one that we're going to cover is, I like this because it's like we talk from our very first podcast, we were talking about testing and how important kind of continual testing is to find those new winning formulas, landing pages, ads, whatever. But we've got a note here about don't do too much testing. What is too much testing?
Any testing that's going to detract from this core sales period. I feel like a lot of the testing that we do up to Q4 is in preparation for Q4. So I think a lot of unless you have testing that is super specific to this time of year, and it's going to be confined and it's not going to run across too many of your SKUs and potentially again detract from your sales from this key sales period. A lot of those tests could be probably pushed to Q1 of next year or done earlier in the year. Because I mean, anytime you're running a test, that's going to be budget, that's going to be time, and it's going to be a certain amount of traffic to your website or wherever you're selling. So, super important to just avoid that kind of unnecessary complexity and make sure that you're focused on what's most important right now, which is getting your product in front of as many people as possible and making sales.
So you go, you don't jump horses midstream. You go with the horse that brought you at this point, where you're putting your budget behind your winners.
1,000%. And the other thing too that I just remembered is that like a lot of the testing that you do in Q4 isn't going to be relevant to the rest of the year anyways, because it's such a unique period. The way that people buy and the way that people behave is so different from the rest of the year. So it's going to be difficult to extrapolate those learnings and bring them to Q1 to Q2 with any kind of success. So you might as well wait anyway,
Guys, this was sweet. This is just the first straight don't podcast. Don't even fuck around with the do's. And I think if you're listening to this podcast, just don't do any of these things and you should more or less be fine.
Also follow some of the do's we discussed.
Yeah, there were some do's. There was a couple.
There were some hidden do's. Do's in there.
Yeah.
And great first episode, Zav. I look forward to connecting with you on this stuff again.
Oh, thank you guys so much. I mean, I'm brutally awkward as a person, so this is so
is Adam. This is great. This is we have our own levels of awkwardness. Awkward people are my favorite people, I think. So
I just say random facts when I get nervous.
Oh, that's when you start talking about like relativity and like carpentry and stuff like.
Yeah, like the reason you don't want to run a test during Q4 is because there's too many confounding variables for all the scientists out there.
Or floors.
Yeah, floors.
People do flooring. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, guys. This was fun. We'll do it again soon. Peace. And if you want like people like this working on your campaigns, you just got to go over to Pilothouse. And I think they do. So they're doing it in droves. It's working great.
Come say what's up.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're not getting the D2C newsletter, you can subscribe for free at directtoconsumer.co. And if you want to learn more about Pilothouse's all-killer, no-filler services, take off to pilothouse.co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.